I'd like to thank you all for joining us. I know it's midweek, and it's really incredible to see so many people coming out on a Wednesday to be here and to join us for this conversation. And I say conversation because really that's what we'd like it to be. It is a conversation that we will perhaps maybe begin, but then we would love for you to join in on this conversation and share your thoughts with us as well. I'm not going to do a quick introduction. I would like to allow my fellow speakers who are joining us here today to introduce themselves, but just very quickly, a little bit on myself. As Afaf said, my name is Khulud Al-Atiyat, and I work at the Salama bint Hamdan Al Nahyan Foundation. I've been with the foundation for about 11 years, and almost exactly 11 years. And I consider myself extremely fortunate and blessed and lucky to be working at a place that really cares about communities and puts people at the center of a lot of the work that we do at the foundation. My role there is with the strategy team, so I'm a senior strategist at the foundation and have had, as I said, the fortune to really work on a number of projects to learn more about what does it take and what does it mean to build communities and what is the value of communities, all things that we will delve into, inshallah, as part of this conversation. But I would like to perhaps begin by asking everyone to introduce themselves. And by way of introducing yourself, perhaps you just add one more element, which is, what is your definition of community? Because I think that if we're going to talk about something, we might as well create common language to a certain extent about this thing that we're talking about. We might all have slightly different or nuanced ways of describing what a community is. So maybe just to begin with, we can share what we mean by community. And maybe I'll begin. It's not really a definition, but I'll just throw out some words that I feel are ingredients or components that perhaps begin to sketch a picture of this definition that I have of a community. And so some of the words are, there's a group of people. So the group is kind of a central word there. Another one is that they're connected somehow through perhaps shared elements. Sometimes their values, sometimes their goals, sometimes maybe they are shared interests that they might have. And the other word that comes to me all the time when I think about communities or a community is belonging and a sense of belonging. So those are just the words I would like to begin throwing out there when it comes to how I see communities or the definition of community that I've come to develop over time. So I'll hand it over. Maybe I'll start with you, Bas, if you'd like to introduce yourself and your definition of a community.
Absolutely. Happy to go first on this one. Good evening, everyone. My name is Bas. I'm originally from Cape Town, South Africa. Been in the UAE for about 12, 13 years now. My background's in real estate. So I'm the founder of a company called the Hive, Coliv. And we're a really small fish in a very big pond, but we specialize in new age, modern, flexible living and working solutions, all of which have placemaking at the heart of it. And very happy to be here in Misa with everyone, very happy to be here tonight to talk all things community. In terms of what community means to me, I think the first thing that comes to mind to resonate what you said is some form of shared interests, shared passion, some commonality. It's a place where people belong. I think it's a place where people feel safe, which is really important. And yeah, I think those are the key words that come up for me: belonging, shared values, shared interests, and safety.
Shall I go next? Thank you, Khulud. Good evening, everyone. My name is Finn. I've been originally from the UK, but based in the UAE for the last 10 years. Originally in Abu Dhabi and then Dubai, and I recently moved back to Abu Dhabi, so it's lovely to be back and part of the community here. Along with Diego, I'm one of the co-founders of Full Special Studio, which is the UAE's first independent commercial Rizzo printing studio. It's a very special type of printing. It's a sustainable printing method. It produces really beautiful, warm, fluorescent prints. So we work with artists, we work with businesses, with institutions of all different shapes and sizes. And for me, community is all about empathy. It's a group, it's obviously a group of shared interests, but it's being able to kind of put yourself in someone else's shoes and figure out like maybe what they need, and if you can help, offer help in some way. And people do that to each other without necessarily expecting some kind of reciprocation. You know, it's just there's no transaction. It's just a kind of general looking out for each other, and yeah, hoping to kind of lift each other up through the community bonds.
Long press.
Hello?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Freddy. It's lovely to be here with you all. Thank you so much. This is a fantastic ambient and environment. Oops. Okay, I will try to refrain myself for moving a lot. I'm a designer. I was born a designer. I grew as a designer because I had a passion for cars, you know, like many kids. And I started drawing cars, and I said, I need to design cars. That never came into as a realization, but I started designing many things, furnitures, exhibitions, and then I jumped into designing services and businesses. And I was on that path until 1 year ago, I got engaged with ATÖLYE. ATÖLYE is where I work right now, which is a design consultancy, but a design consultancy that was born from a community. And it was then and in the last years that I realized that how I should be focusing more on relationships and designing communities rather than designing products or objects for the sake of the business, for the sake also of maybe even all of us. I don't know, maybe that's a later question. And if I had to add 2 ideas to the community, which I really connect with what has been said, one would be emergence, which is a beautiful property. Some of you may relate. Emergencies with, we are all composed of of cells, but our bodies and what we are able to do goes beyond the cell. So we are a system that has emergence. So communities have serendipity, no? And the other one is like boundaries. Like a community is not a network of everything interconnected. You need to pertain to a community and have some sense of belonging, like you said. So also for us that we work on the strategize and design communities, thinking about it like a boundaries kind of makes sense. And that's me.
Thank you, Freddie.
All right. Okay. Here I am. Okay. So I'm Diego. I'm the other half of Full Special Studio. I was born in Mexico, but I grew up in Qatar, so I'm a Khaliji kid. And I grew up. I moved to the UAE 3 years ago, and Finn and I, we met in Dubai, and that's where we started cooking our idea of Full Special. Another thing that I wanted to say, apart from what Finn said about us, is, I'm a printmaker, I'm an artist, and for us it's very important to just raise awareness of the beauty and importance of print through these products that we develop with the different, we're a partner with our community. Because I think print is very relevant and it's beautiful. So talking about community, as I was hearing all of you, I'm really happy to hear that everyone is kind of on sync, because I was thinking about it today in the morning as I was having a shower, and I just thought that communities are intangible. I think that many people might think of like the spaces as community, but I think that communities are the intangible bit, which is the relationships that you were talking about, Freddie. And also trust. That's the bit that I think the most. There's some trust in this relationship, and that's how I think I approach community building.
Okay. Thank you so much for your descriptions or definitions of communities. And what you've each described is is not something that is very easy to create or something that is very easy to build. We've talked collectively about creating a place that brings a sense of belonging, a place that is safe. We've said that it's something that enables growth. It includes partnership. And trust is also something that doesn't come easily. Trust is something that comes through a series of experiences that then enables and builds trust. Now, to create be it a physical place or an intangible place that has those ingredients and that people can experience empathy and growth in an environment that has some boundaries to it, what does it actually take to build such communities? What does it take to build such communities? And because I guess each one of you also, to a certain degree, has, comes from a background and an organization that is also trying to strike a balance between community building and profit making. So how do you go about building these communities, and how do you strike that balance between driving profit and nurturing communities at your respective organizations? And anyone can answer that. Bas, you're very ready to answer.
Ready. I have the answer for all of us. No, I think I'll talk about my perspective. I don't have the answer. Let me start by saying that. I'll talk a little bit about our experience, because what's challenging for us is that we build physical spaces. So we develop real estate, and we are firm believers that what sets us apart is the place, it's the soul, it's the spirit that you find in these buildings. But it's a lot harder than, and I thought it was going to be hard, I thought it was going to be challenging to create the community aspect of it, and it's proven to be, I think, about 10 times harder than I even thought. And I would say, besides all the obvious things that come to mind, I don't have the answer, but I feel like building community or creating community, there's no formula for it. It's a very organic process, and I think the one key thing that I've learned from a physical point of view or physical real estate is that you need a place that is organic, that has character, that has spirit, that's not sterile, and I think that's the kind of condition where you can start to see people coming together and people connecting and people feeling safe and at ease. And I think it's just a very challenging proposition to say we are building a place and we want community to happen in the space. Yeah. It's a very almost arrogant thing to say, and
it's not a build it and they will come situation.
It really isn't. It really isn't. And honestly, it's not how we went into it. Like, we didn't go into it with that arrogance, but it's an ongoing evolutional journey for us to see how people come together. And I think one of the things, the last thing I'll say on this, because I don't want to hog the mic, is just that it's really interesting to see how when you design a certain space, how that resonates with a certain audience, and how it's amazing without saying anything, like just building something, and sometimes it's not the audience that you had in mind, but you will find that there's some subset of the population that resonates with that, and that's been really interesting. So I don't know if any of that made sense, but that's my 2 cents.
I do want to continue along one of the threads that you bring, that you've brought forth, which is the idea of it being organic and that it's an organic process. And I think we all talk to a certain degree in the work that we do about kind of the beauty of things happening organically.
Serendipity.
Exactly. Can you talk a little bit about that? Like, what does organic look like? How have you experienced it? And how do you... I'm sorry, I'm going back to striking a balance between, but that kind of allowing things to organically happen, but also intentionally and proactively designing systems or ideas or building ideas. So
yeah.
What does that organic actually thing look like, and how do you know it's organic?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one. How to go about attracting these people and building community, because I think the most basic way of doing it, which is what we didn't want to go down, is this idea of let's bring people together and stand up and tell me 3 things about yourself, and you know, that sort of high school or university type of setting. And so for us, it's really been about how do we facilitate community, and how do we bring the right people to the right place, and then you kind of stand back and you hope that there's some reaction that takes place. And I guess it's a little bit like cooking, you know, like then you might see, okay, this is a bit slow, let's turn up the heat like a little bit, let's add a bit of salt, oh, that's a bit too much. It's really interesting, and one of the things I would say is, I mean, as you can tell, I'm still a bit perplexed by this whole thing, because one of the things I would say is sometimes you think we have the right audience, this is what these people share, the values, the interests, and then you'll try and stoke something in that direction and it just won't take off at all. And then another time, someone will come and they'll get together, and before you know it, there's like a bonfire because everyone's getting along so well. And it's a very difficult reaction to control. I feel in a way, and for me, the very interesting thing is, how does the physical space manifest itself into the community that you build? Like, that really perplexes me.
You know, what I love about what I'm hearing also is that you saying, I don't have the answer, and we're constantly exploring, just means that it always allows it to be this open-ended exploration, and there isn't really an arrival point. You're in this constant pursuit of continuing to experiment and try, and try something and something would work, and then see, okay, well, that worked here. If I try it somewhere else, is it going to be the same or is it going to be different? So I really appreciate that constant pursuit that you're and the journey that you're on. Any other answers or thoughts on kind of how do you go about actually building these communities?
Yeah, well, I think that, I mean, obviously we are a very young business. We're pretty much brand new. And for us, the way that we have built this community has been through the relationships we've built with people that we've worked with. So I think Fred and I, we've been lucky in a way that we've worked with artists and designers, and we've met these people. We know their practices because they're our friends. So, and I always related to print studio culture, in the sense that in the print studio, you share a space, but also you share the knowledge. You make sure, I'm sure there's like nasty printmakers, but like in general, like people are willing to share knowledge. So then that's how we built our community, through making friends. Yeah. And then when this idea of Full Special came about, it's about through this very special printer that produces like this really interesting prints that is quite unique here in the UAE, we can support our friends and ourselves to, like, everyone grows together. So that's how we kind of strike the balance. And also we act as, we have some clients right now, which is great, big projects, and we've also acted as intermediaries between the artists and the corporate client. So, striking that balance of it's really important, and also the trust of they trust us in these projects, but also we have to be upfront with our artists, because again, we're like the relationship, it involves trust.
Yeah. There are so many things that I want to talk about and kind of build on here, but you've basically just designed and built a space where you wanted to hang out with your friends, to a certain degree.
Absolutely right.
But I think that, in all seriousness too, that's awesome and it's fun. But also, I think one of the things that is important in what you're saying is that there has to be also a sense of shared responsibility. And, if it's a place that is about relationships and about kind of bringing these group of people, printmakers who are going to share this space, there has to be a sense of responsibility. How do you keep that in check, if at all?
I think it's interesting because for us, it's not necessarily about striking a balance between profit generation and keeping our community together, because the two essentially go hand in hand, because the community are our
Can't have
source.
one without the other.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's in our commercial interests, as it were, in order to keep this, to keep those relationships. And it's, as Bas said, it's a constant learning process. We are figuring it out as we go. But for us, you can't separate both of them. The two go hand in hand, and it's intrinsically important to their growth, our growth, the growth of our community as a whole, that we ensure that we keep those, those ties and ensure that trust continues.
And also, like, you see us here right now, but we have been supported by many people who are our friends.
100%.
Too, right?
Yeah.
So it's like it goes both ways. In like, I just think of, like, Khalid and Azim, who have been like so important in helping us start to figure out these things, because they've got so much experience with clients that we go back to them all the time to ask them questions. And also Afaf, I don't know where you are.
I was going to say, yeah.
But Afaf has been, oh, hi. She helped us so much to get this, on its feet. So it's like, you see us here, but we're also, this moment is the product of so many people that have helped us come to this point.
Absolutely.
That's beautiful. Anything you want to add to this conversation, Freddie?
I think so. Because as ATÖLYE, which I'm representing, we are in the business of designing communities somehow. So, and I love the metaphor of cooking, and I think it really kind of boils down to really trying and learning, no? And at the same time, ATÖLYE was born, let me tell a little bit of the story, like 10 years ago, from a thesis from our actual CEO, the idea of building like a co-working space at the time, a co-working space to leverage all of the talent that was inside of Istanbul. And working as a community, they can really reach a higher potential, a group of creatives, no? Like flexibly engaging in projects, let's say. So since then, we have acquired a series of learnings of how to manage our own. It's been 10 years with our community. ATÖLYE is 50 people as a design consultancy, but it has 250 people attached to it as a community. We all live in the same Slack, and we are collaborating in projects and so on. So there is no kind of a real recipe, but we kind of have distilled like a way of strategizing about communities, because in the end, behind the community, there is an intention, no? Like there is an organization. In our case, it's an organization. It's not just ourselves that comes to us and says, I want to build a community. So you need to distill that intention, no? And kind of pre-plan. And then you can experiment with the community. But for example, some of the learnings that we got with the years is like, it's very relevant to start with a core, to identify your champions, your core group of people that is going to be allowing the community to grow and self-develop, and then they are going to be passing the torch, and they are going to be arranging, for example, so many community creators or builders sometimes commit the mistake, to send like a wide message to try to attract as many people as possible, but that suddenly can fade, because the people get attracted by novelty and so on, but you need to curate the community, and you need to start by curating your members, your champions, and then build for them, and there are much more steps that we can talk on, but
I think, you're already jumping into a conversation that I want to get into soon, but just to comment on what you just said is, I think that's really important, because there's two words here that are important, which is champions and curation. And in that process of curation, what you're doing is you're kind of setting an expectation, setting the scenes, setting the values of what everyone coming after this group of champions potentially is expected to adhere to or blend into or reflect as well in a certain way. And what I love about the idea of curating a set of champions, it allows them to a certain degree to be kind of your anchors as well. And then based on their slight individuality and the differences between them, you can begin to build around them. And these champions then become also, to a certain degree, your ambassadors who have an equal and a shared kind of interest in growing that community even further. So I really appreciate this idea of curating a set of champions where you begin there, you establish your foundations, you establish your core, and then you build on that.
Yeah, if I may, one of the very first things that we do, I mean, we work on communities a similar way, what we work on experiences or services. We go and engage with people and start like with research with them, and we try to feel and understand. And one of the first things that comes afloat of that understanding is the purpose of the community. And there is a purpose for the organization, but there is a purpose for the people. And communities, generally, they share emotions, they share a story, and they share a purpose. They share the perspective that there is a better future by being together and belonging. Somehow, it's around that. So we codify that purpose, and those champions, they really embody that purpose. And that purpose also gets transformed into the culture. And culture, you know, that self-propagates and starts to conform and extends kind of the community. So that intentionality, like you said, is there with the champions.
Speaking of purpose, the thought that I had, and I would like to kind of bring to the conversation, is along kind of is along these same lines of purpose. In building and designing and creating these or curating these communities, what is the purpose and what is the impact that you guys are trying to create? What is that ultimate impact that you hope to see? And kind of the follow-up to that is, how do you know that you've achieved that impact? What does that look like? What does that thing or that future look like when you've achieved that impact?
I'll have a go. I'll talk from my own personal experience. I moved to Dubai when I was 22, and I just graduated. And, you know, I guess I came out here to sort of make it. You know, I was 22 and ambitious and hungry, and then I sort of ended up in this 3-bedroom apartment in JLT in Dubai, living with 3 random people that I didn't know. Went to an office where I just met everyone on day one, and, you know, all of a sudden you feel really, really tiny in the world. You know, you like want to phone your mom and dad and be like, what did I do? and I think that experience like stuck with me in terms of then, you know, then you start the slow journey of meeting people at work and slowly starting to network and connect with people. But it just feels like, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I found that journey like it took a long time and it was quite challenging. And so for us, it's an interesting one because with our buildings, like, you know, you guys have something that's very intentional, you know, that people congregate around, you know, and similar to you, Freddie, which is more professional. And, you know, as you were speaking, I was thinking, you know, what is it? And for us, it's more about providing people with a platform where they can move into a space that's safe, but more so they can move into a space that will help facilitate what they are here to do. Because most of the people that move here, you know, have uprooted, they've left people behind, and they've come here with certain ambitions. And for us, it's like, if we can create an environment where these people can connect, they can collaborate, there's a platform for them to, you know, to launch off, then for me, that is success. And I think to answer your last question in terms of what success looks like, I don't know exactly, but I'll tell you, some of the best feelings that we get, like as a team from Hive, is sometimes when we sit in our building or we walk around, and you see 2 people like having a great time, and you would never have thought to see those 2 people together, having a conversation or connecting or collaborating, and you're just like, how did those 2 end up with each other, you know? And that for me is, I don't know, there's some magic there, you know, and I wish as a 22, 23-year-old Bass, like I had that environment around me.
Can you maybe perhaps just, so when you have that moment and you're sitting there and just saying, how did those 2 people connect? You would have never thought to see them connecting or talking. What's the next thought after that? What's the answer in your mind is to the how did that happen?
How the hell did we do it? Like, what is the answer here? How do you do it? I don't know. There's just it's almost that thing about cross-disciplinary design. You know, where you take people from different backgrounds and you put them together and look at the solutions they come up with. And when I see some of these people from different backgrounds, different cultures, different languages coming together, there's just such a beauty in it. You know, and I know I haven't answered your question, but I know how to answer it.
No, I'm just wondering, like, are there certain ingredients, certain decisions and moves that you have done at Hive that have enabled that to happen?
I'll tell you the exact thing that I actually think is that...
So you do have an answer.
Now I have an answer, because I've just realized every time I think there's no way that we could have thought of a way to bring these two people together. Like, there's no way of literally engineering that. Like, I just don't know how you do it. You know what I mean? Yeah.
That's good. Any other thoughts on the impact that you guys are trying to create, and how do you know you've achieved it?
Okay, well, I don't know if we have achieved anything, but I think for
That you
us-
aspire to achieve.
Well, I think that because, I mean, Finn didn't tell you, but he's a photographer, a really good one. So I think he's also an artist. So we are both artists, and we work with artists, and we just want to make cool things with our friends, right? And for us, like, our impact, and one of the reasons why we wanted to have Full Special was because, well, it is, because we also want everyone to fall in love with print as much as we love it, right? And to have our friends create these really cool things and put it out there in the world so that whoever wants to love them, they can love them. So that's how I think we would measure our impact, right?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great answer. But maybe from a more kind of technical perspective, there's two sides to it in terms of, you know, proof that we've achieved something. It's the more intangible element, which is that we have this thriving community of friends and artists that are learning and growing together, but also that, you know, we can create a sustainably profitable business as well, but one that can support us, but also them. And then it's a reciprocal circular economy that continues to support and continues to grow that community, which is what drives us forward. So, yeah.
I think that, and I absolutely feel that in what you're describing, the way that you're talking, Diego, which is, you know, just wanting people to fall in love with printmaking. Like, that is, I absolutely love that, because I can sense this like contagious kind of feeling that you're bringing out, that is coming from a place of passion, and I think is extremely important. I've always said that I really appreciate and respect so much people who are just like interested in like one thing and just want to really dig deep into that one thing and make everyone know about it and love it and convert everyone to just love that one thing.
Yeah, I'm guilty of that.
That you are guilty of that.
Hi, Diego.
Anything else you want to add, Freddie, or do you have any thoughts to add to this conversation?
Well, no, I wish I have an intentionality and a community. I love that. I generally work on building communities for others, and they are the ones that put that intentionality in there. But something came to my mind that I didn't mention earlier that I think that is connected to what you said about cooking. Is like we always think of communities about something that needs to be cultivated somehow. And cultivated meaning like you put the soil, and you choose the seeds, and you put the seeds, and then you prune it, but you don't know, you cannot manage it. You know, it grows in many directions. Like you said, I don't know how these people are going to be going together, and how this is kind of the emergence that and the magic and the serendipity of a community. You know, so you may have an intentionality, but it's kind of an exponential growth that starts slow, and then something, it can be blooming and going in many ways, in many directions.
I'm loving these metaphors of cooking and then the metaphor of farming and growing something, because I think especially this one is actually really important, because the way that you take care of a palm tree is very different than the way that you would take care potentially of a mango tree or of a fig tree. And so what that means is that you also need to know your community. You also need to know the members of your community, and you need to know, when are you overwatering? when do you need to take a step back and allow them to you've just put enough water, and now for the next 2 or 3 days, you're not supposed to touch that plant. You're supposed to allow it to grow on its own. And is there such a thing as over-nurturing? Is there such a thing as like overdoing for communities? And I think that is a question that sometimes I know definitely in the work that I've done have grappled with, because there's a part of me that just wants to do so much for them and wants to do everything. But at the same time, you have to take a pause and stop, because you might be creating an unwanted situation in the future where they become reliant on you kind of providing everything for this community. And you have to think about, okay, what are the tools that they need to be empowered with that can allow them to thrive together? And when you are no longer there, or when they graduate your environment, that they can still continue to stand on their own feet and continue to move forward and propel their career or propel their life forward. So I think that is a really important thing to think about and talk about, which is this balance between overdoing and over-curating everything, as well as creating some space that is not overly programmed for them. I do want to go back to kind of, so we talked a little bit about how do we go about building these communities, and what is it that we're trying to achieve. And I don't want to sound horrible when I say this, but why should we care? Why should people care? Why should we care about communities or building communities? What is the value of building and creating communities? And what is the value? I guess we can look at it from multiple perspectives, because there's a value on the community members themselves, and then there's a value for the businesses that you all run and operate. And there is also a larger value, like it could go from like individual to the business, but then there's also the layer of the ecosystem that they exist in. Is there a way to begin to articulate what is the value, and hence why should we care about building communities and creating communities? Does anyone want to go before Bas? All right, Diego.
I mean, as you guys can see, I'm the much more ethereal person in this. He's the more business oriented. I think that.
But that's great. You need both.
Yeah. No, for sure. I think that I've been thinking a lot about this in terms of, because our business is centered about this, like around these people, right? If we don't have our community, we don't have a business. Because these artists and designers, apart from doing projects with us, we also have the service of them producing the work at full special. So literally, if they don't exist, we cannot exist. And that's kind of what prompted me to think about this element of, like, we have to survive together. So I think the value is there, right? Like, it's not only about growing, but it's also about surviving together, because one cannot exist without the other. So I don't know if you want to add something else.
I'll put my ethereal hat on for for a small moment, but I think it's intrinsic on us as humans. We're social beings, and we want to be part of communities, and it makes us happy. So fundamentally, it's very important that we exist as part of these communities, and then that creates a healthy and happy society as well.
Anything else? No?
After.
Yeah, I have two thoughts to share. One is like sometimes communities is not easily perceive the value that they have for businesses. Let's say like it's a different angle, but for example, many of you may know about communities of support. Like nowadays, many companies or software, they have like forums where they have communities that those communities are making are becoming the support center, because among them they are answering each other questions and so on. But communities can really serve a lot for business in many more areas. Through communities, you can enrich your innovation pipeline and you can get ideas for your products and services if you have an engaged community that really cares. And for example, let me put an example. There are two examples. Maybe one that is like, do you know Duolingo? Apart from having a phenomenal gamification system and being like an AI, it also has a community of creators. And Duolingo, maybe you know also Rosetta. Rosetta, it's another company. Yeah, Rosetta Stone has, I think, 5 times more employees than Duolingo at the time. So they have like 1,500, and Duolingo was 300. And Duolingo was able, with this community, to provide 100 languages because the community was building the courses, was motivated and part of the community. And you know, the mission of Duolingo, it's positive, at least perceived by them, of the community. So they were able to scale the business thanks to the community in a way that was not feasible for Rosetta Stone, which handles many less language. And the same happened with Udemy, which is this platform to create courses. They are created by the community, and that's why they are able to scale and produce many things, because communities can be part of your value chain and your value proposition in many ways beyond what is generally noticeable. That's my first thought, and maybe we can unpack that if you are interested. But my second one, why do we care? On a personal level, I think I was an experienced designer for most of my life. So experience, as many of you may know, means on focusing on giving someone, the user or the consumer, a fantastic experience, no? And when you get a fantastic experience, everything is coming to you. You know, like you get this excellent journey of fantasy and products and things and so on. And when you are the protagonist and you are part of something, you are not part of a relationship, and you are not part of a community. Communities have this thing that you care for others. Your communities allow people to really be more owning the responsibility of the shared community. And that, I think, is going to be a driving force to change many of the problems that we have nowadays, which is engaging together in things that are important for us, and together changing them, you know? Because we care because of this shared thing that unites us, instead of just being like the only person that enjoys this experience and this life and, you know, everything is coming to me. Somehow, it's a thought in the making, but I think you get the point, and I'm really a believer of the power of communities to transform many aspects of society, of course, not just businesses. But there are theories around there, like through communities of practices is going to be the way that we can change many of the non-working systems right now.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. On the Duolingo thing, though, Duolingo is the thing that always makes me feel so ashamed and keeps shaming me in my inbox about not.
Brutal.
I know you haven't, checked your app today, and you didn't do this lesson. But besides that, I think that one of the things I love about what you're talking about, Freddie, is that it made me actually reflect a little bit more and think about the value of communities. By the way, a bunch of these questions that I've written down, or a bunch of questions that I'm thinking of, I'm also just literally reflecting on them as I'm having this conversation with you guys. And one of the things that is becoming is crystallizing is the communities are also, one of the values of communities is that they're one of the ways that enables you to keep your finger on the pulse on the ground. If you are kind of having to be in a position of, owning companies and being in this being bogged down by a lot of the operational aspects of the business and having to think about, your future strategies and what do you need to do from a, business perspective, sometimes it's easy to become disconnected from what's happening on the ground and begin to design a future that is removed or disconnected from that. And I believe that it's the communities that you're connected to and the communities that you create and those people that help you always stay in check to a certain extent and always help you remain aware of what's happening and enable a more relevant and a more a future that you design that resonates just a lot more with people. I don't know if that makes sense.
I think it makes a lot of sense, and especially for businesses that are reliant on some form of community. You know, if you take something like what we're doing, it's sort of, how do you scale that? You know, it's okay when you have one asset with 100 people, 150 people, but when you start talking about companies growing and scaling aggressively, you know, there's very few examples I can think of where companies have scaled successfully whilst staying true to their initial mission, you know. And I think that's, again, don't have the answer, but that's an interesting question to ponder. At scale, how do you maintain community?
I feel like by the end of this evening, people will be sick of the word community. But that is what you guys signed up for, so there's more community conversation that's going to happen. I think we've kind of alluded to it to a certain degree, but maybe just doubling down a little bit on this, which is, what does an ideal community look like? Or what is an ideal community? What does it look like? How does it behave? How does it speak? If you were to start to describe it in kind of more tangible ways, what does that ideal community look like to you? It could be the community that you're trying to create. It could be a community that you saw and you're like, that looks like an awesome group of people and I want to belong to it and I want to be part of it.
I'll tell you, one of the things that I found interesting with Hive and our community was that how in the beginning it is so fragile. When you have 10 people, 15 people in your community, and as it's growing, you know, at that point it's still very undefined and the boundaries are very, very loose. And it was really interesting to see how one bad actor, someone with different intentions, or, you know, could come in and spoil the party. And I think one of the things I found really fascinating is how, especially once you start having some community champions come through, you know, and it very quickly reaches a certain scale where I feel like the community becomes self-regulating. And one of the things I found super interesting is to see sometimes how a person comes into the community that you could clearly see is there for the wrong reasons, it's not a fit, and how quickly they get ejected from the community. Not in a nasty, like, you shall not be friends with us kind of way, go sit over there, but just sort of the community just sorts it out. But it needs to reach a certain maturity for it to happen. And I think, you know, talking about plants and nurturing, those early stages are so critical. You know, at that point you need to be really, really on top of it, and then thereafter I feel like you can really, really let go.
We work with artists, and you know this, Khulud, it's not easy, especially when it comes to deadlines. So the ideal community would be a community that would have, like, you know, like, deliver on time. Me included, you know, I'm also guilty of that. Yeah, I mean, I work with artists in different capacities, not only, you know, at Full Special. I have the privilege of working with artists in other capacities, and they're just like, it's sometimes it's hard to manage people. Yeah. So I mean, sometimes I wish that people were easier to manage, but like, they're not, right? So that's when the relationship bit is important, because then you understand the other person and you know when to back off, when to push more, or when to not approach.
I think that this is making me think about kind of one of the earliest communities that we were trying to build at the through one of the programs at the foundation. And I don't know how many people here I know that you are very familiar with the Salama Emerging Artists Fellowship, or commonly known as SEEF now. I remember in 2013 when we began thinking about SEEF and when we began kind of creating SEEF as a program, one of the things that we did is we went out to kind of the ecosystem and spoke to emerging artists. We were like, okay, who are, let's try and find a number of emerging artists and talk to them about their needs and talk to them about, what are some of the gaps that exist in the ecosystem that could help take their kind of career to the next level. And what is that next level that they're trying to achieve? And one of the things, there were many things that people spoke about in terms of needs or gaps or challenges that they're facing and pain points. One of the things that came up constantly as a pattern that we noticed is that they said a lack of a community for us as artists, lack of like-minded people where we can come together. And, in digging deeper into that, one of the things that they were talking about is that for it to be a source of support system for one another. And so if I was to kind of now look back, is an ideal community a place where people can find support when they need to? One of the things I know that we try and do through the CEIF program is that create enough of a environment and enough of experiences that once the program is over, the 10 months are over and you've graduated from the program, that you can still lean back on that community. So to me, a measure perhaps of kind of an ideal community is one that can continue to exist without the organized environment that you have created for it to a certain degree. And it's beautiful to see that happen with CEIF in kind of in different ways, shapes and form. But I think that is potentially, I guess, one of the elements of an ideal community. Fredo, you have something?
Yeah, you connect me with one thought. That is also, I think, entangled a little bit with what you were mentioning about communities being like the measure of the pulse earlier. Like, I think a community is kind of an in-between with an organization. It's not the organization, but it's not also the outside of the organization. Yeah. It's something like in the middle that has traits of both sides in a way. And regarding what you said, for some communities, depending of course on the purpose and the intention, like you said, I totally agree that for them, metric of success would be that they go along, no? That they self-propagate and they are like autonomous and they grow. And sometimes for that, the interesting thing when you think from the organization perspective is that you need to let control to the community, which is not, I guess it's counterintuitive for many that hire us, that it's going to be because of that in-between, no? What does it mean, let control? For example, I'm going to mention two communities that are very successful because of that, very well known. One is Wikipedia. Wikipedia, the CEO does not have any executive decision on what is happening on the Wikipedia. And on the contrary, they trusted the role of the collaborators in order to expand and produce this fantastic tool. But also because their purpose is that, no, it's also to expand. And another one that we can relate with is the TED Talks that we all know. You know that the TED Talks, they have these versions of them that they are more localized, the TEDx, we all know very well. TEDx could have existed as a format, super controlled, like top down, in which you need to do it this way, that way, and that's the topic. But TEDx is totally distributed. It's the community that creates TEDx. They choose the topic, they choose the venue, they get the revenue, and so on. So letting the organization letting go, part of the control, and curating the community allow us to thrive and to expand in directions.
Absolutely. And I think that is... Oh. What does a red light mean? Is it working? Yeah. Okay. All right, but it's red light, just saying. Is it still working? Okay, I'm fine. I know, exactly. That's exactly. I was about to say it's the last question, actually. So, all right. I mean, it's working. Okay, Mario. All right. This is a green light, so I'll keep going, Hanan. last question. I have a few more questions, but I'm going to stop being greedy, and maybe I'll just ask you a last question, and then open it up for questions from our guests here. The last question that I have can sometimes be a challenging question. I personally love to ask this question, and sometimes I can see people kind of be a bit challenged by it. So if you need some more time to think about it, and maybe we open up the floor to questions, and then we come back to my question. So my question is, what is the question that you wish you were asked, or that people ask you about what you do? And then how would you answer that question?
That's brutal.
Is there a question that you just think, oh, Khulud, I wish you asked me that question today, and I haven't so far? Or a question that you walk around and you say, why do people not ask me about this? And how would you answer it? Shall we move on and then you come back to it? Or shall I give you a little bit more time?
That's a showstopper. What's a question that you wish people would ask you?
Yeah, about what you do.
I mean, it's not.
Okay,
It's not
we
gonna,
have something.
It's not going to fully answer your question, but I think it's remarkable how few people ask you why do you do what you do.
Okay.
You know, I think it's very fascinating because everyone asks you what you do, and you tell people, and they go like, "Oh, cool, nice." And slowly your story comes out eventually, you know. And I think people often find that so interesting, but it's very seldom that people actually ask you, why is it that you're doing what you're doing?
So why do you do what you do?
I mean, I think I've given you guys a glimpse into that already tonight, you know, and it's really, and I think a lot of these things do come from just personal frustrations or pains, you know, that you're trying to solve. And I think that's, for me, what drove me, you know. I went through a long drought in starting this thing, and for me it was really just about trying to solve that problem. And I think that's really interesting when there's a problem that has a personal cause to it. And that's a really strong motivator, you know. And
is that still the driving force today, even
absolutely,
many years after?
Absolutely, because we're still so small, and in some ways we're still really in the early stages of our journey, you know. And I think what's really nice is when you start to see these glimpses of every now and then you see this experiment is working. You know, most days it's filled with, oh, this is not working. Yeah. But then every now and then you get this glimpse of, wow, like, look at those people, or you hear, like, you know, people met in our building and now they're getting married, and you know, like those kind of things. This has happened, and those kind of things you go like, okay, maybe
any
we're onto
singles
something.
in the room?
So yeah.
Have you guys had the chance to think of a question?
I can say, like, I come here also representing ATÖLYE, and the question would be, how can I reach you to design a community? No, but that would be from a professional perspective. From a personal perspective, I think I'm satisfied because I was able to transmit that I do believe in communities as a transformational power. And I invite everyone to join a community or to try to nurture one like you guys are doing. So let me give me some more minutes to think.
No worries. Do you guys want to answer, or do you want us to open the floor?
Should we open the floor? I'm honestly floored.
All right. So, great. Awesome. So we have a question right back there. And maybe if you can just begin by just introducing yourself, your name, and then asking your question. And a mic will magically appear in front of you. Long press.
Hello.
Yes, it's on.
Hi, I'm Shiraz, and my question is, I guess it's more for Bas.
For Bas?
Yeah, it's more about how does placemaking or the construction of spaces establish a high trust community, because you guys open with the concept of like high trust and low trust communities.
And the question is, how do the construction of these spaces facilitate trust, or
the high trust community, you know?
Yeah, I'm a little bit stumped, to be honest. I think trust is something that takes a long time to form, and I think I'm not sure if it's going to answer your question, but I would say what's been really powerful for us is when we built the community, we came from a place of really, how do I say it, like a real, we didn't know everything, and we were very open, very honest with our residents, with our members, and we kind of came from a place of, guys, we're building this together. We were super vulnerable. We were super open to criticism, and I think when people see that, they really resonate with that. It's brutal in terms of some of the feedback. You know, we used to do, we still do like monthly sessions with our community where it's super open, and honestly, sometimes we get slaughtered. And but these are really healthy sessions, you know. And I think, I don't know if it answers your question, but I feel like for us with our community, that builds a lot of trust, that we are there, we are listening, we take things on the chin, we respond.
Okay, I think I can just reframe it like so. If you're putting it in terms of a ratio, how much of it is the place and how much of it is the people?
Ah, interesting. Okay, okay. Now, yeah. Yeah. I think that's it's a really interesting question, because I do think the design plays a big role in it, and not just in the way that I used to think about it, and I touched on that earlier. I think the design, just the look and the feel of the design, automatically filters trust in the community. That's the first big step. And then I think once you get past that, it's then the functional design of the spaces. And I don't know, we went down the route of really trying to keep things organic, very adaptable. I felt really strongly that it should be a space that you could feel very at ease at. You could move things around, the place could change. I don't know, for me it's similar to creativity. I feel like creativity needs a certain amount of chaos or organicness, if that's a word, to messiness to
doesn't
thrive.
the best creativity come from good constraints?
It's say that again. Doesn't the best creativity?
Doesn't the best creativity come from like good constraints and
Yeah,
hard rules?
I think a lot of creative problem solving comes from having constraints and trying to solve that. I think in terms of physical design of space, I think it's really good to leave space for both private and public. And so I think we've tried to create a blend of spaces where it's really open, really organic, and then there's other spaces that are much more closed off, much more private, to try and facilitate a range of interactions. But I think, I don't know, adaptability for me is key. Like, people need to be able to come in and use the space and adapt the space. And I don't think we can have the arrogance to say, this is the space, now go and be a community and engage with the space.
I guess this one's more for all the panelists. So does the UAE excel in the concept of third spaces? I mean, third places, the concept of third places.
The concept of third places.
Yeah.
Like a third space.
Yeah.
If I may, I would like also to contribute to your previous question, because of learnings that we got to build trust. Think about that Atelier, we are a community of creatives, a community of practice. And we found out that one of the things that built more connections was through learning together. Like we did like learning programs and training, because that, if you think about it, allow people to really be open, face challenge, and kind of play like kids and kind of connect, beyond like usual interactions that you can take in a space. That would be something that for me to share, like about learning together to build trust, or in a way like maybe project-based. And the other thing is like the way we grew was kind of the opposite, maybe like the way to Bas, because we grew without a space. So we grew like together, kind of creating the relationships, creating the bonding and working together and collaborating, and then the space came after. And that was, for us, something that worked, because the community was able to reflect on the space and create it for their purposes. So yeah, that's another way to look at it, let's say.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Do we have, do we have another question? I apologize. Just to give other people a chance. Maybe we come back if we have some time, we'll come back to you, I promise. Okay? Any other questions? Yes, we have a question in the back over here.
All right, I'd like to start by thanking you guys for arranging this amazing talk. My name is Abdullah. My question is about the guy said that building a community is one of the hardest things to do. So I'd like to know what are the main challenges, or maybe one or two the challenges that you faced while building the community. Also, what would be some of the resources that you would like to see or initiatives that would help you build a community in an easier way?
Great question. Thank you for that. What are some of the challenges you guys face when trying to build communities? I'm sure there are many stories that you can talk about.
Perhaps I'll jump in.
Go for it, go for it.
I think, as you know, Diego has mentioned, and everyone has mentioned, you know, ultimately a community is a collection of human beings, and those relationships, those interpersonal connections, they can be difficult sometimes, you know, and you have situations that require a lot of care and a lot of attention. So it's balancing those constantly to ensure the collective well-being of the entire community. That's probably, especially for us as a small business, you know, and one that relies on these very personal connections that we have with our collaborators. For us, that's probably the biggest challenge, is making sure that we pay enough attention to them and what they need, and but also keep, you know, as Diego mentioned earlier, the acting as the intermediary role between clients and between the kind of corporate world, but also the creative world. It's bridging those gaps is sometimes difficult, but you have to kind of figure out how to get people to speak each other's language and be that translator sometimes as well between those two levels. But that's what makes it worth it ultimately.
And also, like, just to piggyback on that, like, Finn and I were friends too, so we also have to mediate that, right? Like, so yeah, that's a main challenge, just managing people. And what would we like to see to build better communities? I mean, honestly, I'm seeing a lot. I mean, especially here in Abu Dhabi, I'm seeing a lot of infrastructure that it's being built for communities to come about. I think it would be nice if people go and use them. You know, that'd be really nice. But I think there's like a push and an interest to have people intermingle and be cohesive. So, like, you know, I hope that just people go and do that.
I think maybe I do have something here to add and to share, is that one of the challenges, so if I was to reflect back on the experience with SEEF, Salama Emerging Artists Fellowship Program, for some reason, so it's been 11 years that the program has been running now. For some reason, one of the challenges that, and maybe this is a personal thing, that happens every single year, and every single year it's proven that it should not be a challenge, and it's not a challenge, is this question of, is the community out there? Is there an actual community? And the challenge is that fear of, will we one year just not receive any applications? Have we tapped out the community? And the fear starts to build sometimes, and you think, is there still a reason for us doing what we're doing? Do people still care about it? Do people still want it? And so what then needs to happen there is that you need to balance that out with your gut feeling, and trusting that gut feeling that yes, there is. Yes, the people are out there. And I just need to do everything in my power to tap into that community and find it and create a reason for it to come to this place or to this experience or to this program that we're trying to create. And so you then start to explore, well, what are the ways that we do that? And so, for example, with SEEF, what we've done is we realized that, you know, we might not know all of the artists in the UAE and all of the emerging talent and the incredible talent that exists. In fact, just to share with you a story, there was a moment in the early years when we began the program where we were told by some people that there might not be enough artists in the UAE, and you guys should not do the program every year and maybe wait and do it once every 2 years to allow more artists to emerge. And every year that is proven to be wrong. And so, but one of the things we've realized is, of course, we can't know all of the artists in the ecosystem. And so what we've done is we've created a nomination pool. And what we do is every year, the exiting cohort becomes nominators. And so we know that our community knows the community that we're after. And so people from the exiting cohort nominate the next group, and as well as other people in the ecosystem. So the understanding that we don't have all of the answers, and the answers exist. This is back to us needing the community as much as the community needs us. So trusting that the answers to some of those scary questions and challenges lie within the community itself as well. But that is, I mean, me being completely honest, one of the challenges that we have to get over. Maybe it's a mental challenge, it's not a real challenge, but sometimes those mental challenges are the most difficult to get over because you don't have a way to quantify them or to see them physically in front of you. I don't know if anyone else has anything else to add. Absolutely. There's a mic there. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Yeah, Khulud, just to put a point on what you were saying, an essential part for a community is to feel belonging. And as locals, for example, you were telling about the Sheikh Salam project or the program. I haven't heard about it, and I'm interested in art, and I've heard it from my friend just recently. So one thing is for locals to feel they belong in that community and to have the Emirati identity. Yeah, we welcome you all, of course, and we love you all, but we need our flavor in that also. So that's the point, just to answer one of the challenges you were talking about. And thank you.
Thank you so much for that point. And specifically for the program that I'm talking about, the program is for Emiratis and non-Emiratis. It's open for both. And every year the cohort has Emiratis and non-Emiratis in it. It's a program that is not an open call, so people cannot apply to it. It's by nomination. However, what we've said in the past, if there's anyone who believes that that their portfolio is a portfolio they want to present to the program, is to send us an email, and then we can run it through our nominators, and they decide if they will nominate that person or not. So if you go to our website, find the SHF email or my email, khulud@shf.ae. It's not that difficult to guess. Feel free to share your portfolio with me. You're welcome. What's your name? Shamsa. Nice to meet you, Shamsa. Any other questions? Yes.
Hi. Thank you, Khulud, for hosting this very interesting discussion. It's more just of a comment. My name's Martine, and I'm part of the Marmalata restaurant group, and I think we have a slightly different definition of community, and I just thought it was interesting that the discussion tonight was very much centered on community being a noun. It's something you achieve, you see, you feel, you can measure as a KPI even. In the restaurant, we always talk about community as a verb. So we always talk about practicing community. And one of the only other sort of words I can think of that you practice like that is something like practicing your faith. And I think community is something that is a conscientious choice. And it's a rule of engagement. It's how you interact with everyone, with the barista, with the cashier at Spinneys, with your colleagues, with people that you meet, with people that come to you. It's a practice. So that's just a comment I wanted to make, that I really think of community as a verb. It is something you practice.
I absolutely love that. And thank you so much, Martine, for sharing it. And I think that, I mean, you know how much I love the Marmaletta community, yes. and how yes. you guys have built such an incredible community. But I think that especially you guys, you're very, very unique in the way that you approach community, because I think it's, as you said, it's much more than a noun. It's a behavior. Yeah. It's an act, and it is informed by many things also that allows it to be that very kind of unique experience that one really can almost touch when they engage and interact with Marmoletta. So yeah, I absolutely agree with you that it is something that you guys actually choose to do in every action and in every engagement and interaction that you have with the people who stand in your line and walk in through your doors.
Right. And that's how we have built our community, is by
Exactly.
practicing community.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a
I
verb.
absolutely love that. Any other questions from this side? I haven't looked over here. Okay, so we'll go here, and then Sydney, and then Hanan. So, by the way, I promise I don't know everyone in the room. I know I'm calling on people by their names, but I don't know everyone in the room.
Thank you. My name is Tala, and I didn't know how to ask this question for as long as we've been sitting here. And after hearing Martin, I'm like, oh yeah. So shout out Martin, thank you. The thing that I couldn't help but think about throughout this conversation is when we think of community historically speaking was for survival. Like we come together as a collective. It's a very collectivist. There's a collectivist energy about it. And I think that what Martin was saying, and as a fan of Marmoletta as well, I think something that Marmoletta does really well is feel inclusive. Like they feel like they are their own brand and they are building a community, and it is a business after all. But there is a conscious effort of being inclusive and conscious socially, culturally, way beyond just the kind of confounds of what is profitable or what is like, oh yeah, we love pizza, we love all of this stuff. Like, yes, of course, yes, we do. I think that we're in a very interesting context here in the UAE. Like, I genuinely think we're very privileged to be here, even in this room. This is access. And I don't know, I can't help but think, and as a fellow business owner as well, I'm very curious to hear like how we can, in this context that's hyper capitalistic, hyper individualized, and like there's so much going on in the world. There's a really good poem, I'm going to butcher this, but in order for me to write poetry, the airplanes, I have to hear the birds sing, and in order for me to hear the birds sing, the warplanes must be silent. And I think in this case, like, it can be warplanes, it can be poverty, it can be ethnicity in specific cases, it can be creed, whatever it might be. And so I think like now more than ever, like art is such, like by definition, almost like it challenges the status quo, and it can really permeate boundaries, it can really travel far. I'm very curious like how we can have an approach that's critical to community to prevent it from becoming this like means to an end, almost like also commercialized in a way. Like even our community, you know, like we have to like consciously remind ourselves like, oh my God, you know, all the first world problems and that kind of thing. So I'm very curious to hear a little bit more about that, how we can extend, you know, that meaning of community beyond just like our vocation to like, you know, more horizontally. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. I'm gonna hold back. There's an answer that I almost want to burst out with, but I will hold back, and I'd like to hear from you guys first.
I mean, I would just give you my very short 2 cents, is that I feel like nothing kills this aspect of community more than a capitalistic drive for it. And I think people are so sophisticated and on it these days that brands that are out there that are using community as a tool just to profit off, I think people can smell that from a mile away. And I think it's really brands that are super authentic, that are super caring, that are super intentional about the community, and that generally, like, I look at us, like we really, for us, it really is about the community. Like, we really want to build the community, and the amount of satisfaction that we get out of seeing the beauty of the community, and forget about the profit and those kind of things. I think that's what drives us, and I think people can feel that somehow, you know, like that authenticity. And I'd say that's it for me. Like, when I walk in somewhere and I see someone trying to build community for the purpose of profiting, like straight away, there's nothing that puts me off more than that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna tell you from our, from our perspective of having a print business, right? Print is democratic, and it's been, I mean, as an art form, it's been essential in pretty much countered everything that you just said, right? Like, if you think about it, like, a lot of political movements forever, print has been so essential for that. But also, we work with a material, or with our way of printing is equal. I mean, I don't know if we spoke about it enough, but risograph printing, we love it because it's ecological. It prints with rice bran, with inks that are rice bran based, and soybean, and all of these things that degrade into the ground and they don't cause any harm. So, and it's very accessible because it's not expensive. So for us, everything that you're saying resonates because it's part of who we are, in terms of having this thing that we consider beautiful and important, also make it accessible and approachable for everyone. So I'm glad that you opened up this, because this is also part of who we are.
I really think that it's a very, very important conversation. And I'm really grateful for Martin for kind of instigating it for us. And the immediate kind of reaction, and the first thing that came to my mind when you asked that question is the word relationships. But I took some time to kind of think a little bit more about it, and I think that it's not just relationships on its own, but it's authentic, genuine, generous relationships. And I think that's how you take it out of the context that you were describing. And, going back to Marmaletta again, we're not sponsored by them. But I've been a cult member since 2019. And to just describe and put kind of an actual kind of experience of what that looks like is that, the choice that Raj makes when in 2019 he's got people lined outside and he knows he's run out of dough and he's not going to be able to feed the 50 or 100 people standing in line. How do you not get people, how do you make sure that people are not angry? How do you make sure that people are never going to come back and leave and never come back to your place? How do you make sure that you still, and this is the wrong word to use, and I apologize, but I don't know what else to use. How do you make sure that you still win them over? Not that you guys are trying to win people over, but you get what I'm trying to say. How do you make sure that you still enable them to connect with you and become a community member? And it's in the decision to say, you know what, I'm going to chop up my focaccia. Back then there were no pizzas, they were just focaccias. I'm going to chop up my focaccia into small pieces and go give it out to them for free and not charge them for the focaccia. And potentially, he was just, they had just started. It was a new business. There's potentially losses that are being financial losses that are happening, but they care more about building bonds and building genuine, strong bonds and relationships with these people than the bottom line. And this is something that they still do till this day. I mean, Raj shared with me a story that is exactly that still happens today. So I think it's that when you're genuinely, authentically interested in relationship building, you go about it in a very different way than if you're interested in it because it's going to, crank up your bottom line. Sorry, that was a long-winded answer slightly, but I hope it's satisfactory. Sydney, you have a question. I did. Can I give you my mic?
Yeah. Hi, guys. I'm Sydney. My question builds off of yours, Tala, but it's a little bit different, so maybe you can add some nuance. In the startup phase, how do you navigate and balance the need for organic growth, like what she's asking about, and meeting your bottom line and the business model and the revenue building. And maybe I can pick on you, Freddie, from ATÖLYE, since you're agency-based and you're essentially advising community builders and practitioners. How do you advise them to navigate this balance and this need? Organic growth versus driving the business forward.
Thank you, Sydney.
That's a complex issue to sort out as an answer. I would say that you need to find a way to maybe also consider like how your startup is prone to be have a community with them, no? Like they are really. You need to find out what's the kind of the value that is going to be given to your community members, and what's the value that you are going to be getting you for it, let's say, and see how you can balance that in a way that is satisfactory for both sides. Because being part of a community means that exchange of value between all of the members, no? Like you are there because you are going to be getting something, and that's something that needs to be, like I would say, like a tailor in order to achieve it. Let's say, but I don't have a clear answer on that. I don't have a way to tell you how, like a magic wand or a formula to do that, honestly.
Last question, I think, from Hanan.
Hi. Question, but maybe a reflection, again, building on what Martin and Tala said. Something that, as everybody was talking, I kept thinking about an aspect of community that we didn't really touch or hear from is that I think about is the sense of like you have to sacrifice, you have to give something up, or you have to give something of yourself. And many times here, the communities that I heard you guys talking about are like kind of a convenience. It's like I'm there, I fit in, I get what I need, whether it's a collaboration or a dose of, a socialization, but then I go to my space, I do my thing. So I just wonder, like, is the idea of sacrificing, giving, choosing things for others that are not for you, integral to forming a community? Or is that, that's just one form, but you could have these more, I guess, light touch community, I would call them? Is sacrifice and giving a key part of, for individuals in a community?
I definitely think so. And I think a big part of community is value exchange. People are exchanging value, and I think it's so interesting for us to see. And Freddie used this example of champions, and we literally refer to some of our community champions because you will find these people that are just so generous with their time, with their expertise, and it's so infectious. And that's the super interesting thing to see is once you have 3 or 4 of these people, everyone else in the community suddenly perks up and starts going, okay, well, I need to contribute, to be in this community. And then you really start seeing magic happen. And I don't know, I'm just always amazed at these beautiful people that we cross paths with that contribute, and drive things forward. So I'm a firm believer in that.
No, it's okay. I got it. Yeah, I think we touched upon it when we spoke about authentic, generous relationship building. And I think also something that I didn't mention, but that I think of when I'm like, the way that we have built this community is through presence. And presence is sometimes, you don't have, there's nothing that you're exchanging really but presence, right? And yeah, the end kind of, if you want to think about it, is the like this relationship, like this exchange that will happen, right? But in reality, the important bit of the relationship is being present with the other person.
And there's a kind of intangible work that happens as well, right? You know, there is that give and take that, yes, ultimately there might be some kind of exchange that is a result of that, but there is a lot of effort put in from all sides, and things are given up in a certain sense.
Any last thoughts or last questions? Someone like has a burning question. Okay, all right. Khalas, last question over here, and then we'll wrap up. I'll give you my mic.
Hi, my name is Jamal. I was born and raised here in Abu Dhabi, but I live abroad since like, I don't know, 13, 14 years. So specifically in Germany, I was living in Bremen for like 10 years. And I just, like, I had my friends, my like family, and everyone is there. Not my real family, they are here in Abu Dhabi. So when I moved, I was kind of forced to move to Berlin 1 year ago. And I was afraid, like, I would leave my friends, like my community and like everyone. And then it took me like 2 weeks to find the community, you know, the neighborhood, the people, friends. And not from my perspective, I want to hear your perspective, that we're not born and raised here. When I come to Abu Dhabi, and I came now to open a coffee, I have my old friends, like from school. I have like big family, huge family actually. So if you are an expat, like a friend of mine, he just moved to Abu Dhabi and he opened a business. So he's not working in a company, he has no co-workers or stuff. How can he join a community? I find it a bit hard, especially now, like 12, like, I don't know, 15, okay, long time ago, it was easier. We were sitting in a park, we were like doing that easy stuff and basic stuff. But now it's like, I find it very, I don't know, it's like luxury and like a bit harder for people to like blind in and stuff. So, like, if you are an expat, how can you join a community? That was a question that I was thinking about for a long time. So I just opened the coffee, and it's a community coffee. And I'm starting a program called Give Something Back to Abu Dhabi from January, actually. It's called the B Club. It's still like in soft opening. But I have like, I thought, okay, I will like support, we will close one day to support an artist, and everything will be for free. So it's just from someone from Abu Dhabi to Abu Dhabi. So I was like asking, how can you join a community as an expat that doesn't know anything about the culture or just basic knowledge about the culture and the people, like the process of an expat coming to Abu Dhabi to start a new life. How can you join a community? Yes.
Any thoughts before?
I'm happy to go for it.
Go ahead.
I think one of the things that's challenging here is that back home you have the culture in common with people, so it's a lot easier to kind of find your niche or your groove. I don't know. For me personally, also I think it also depends heavily on whether you're introverted or extroverted. You know, I'm much more introverted, so I was going to say the obvious answer is to pursue interest-based groups, like if you're into chess or surfing or skating, whatever it is. But I don't know, for someone like me, like as a more introverted person, and I think it also becomes more challenging as you get older. It's challenging, but I would say like seeking out interest-based communities, and then within that trying to find your niche is great. But I've always found it a really fascinating thing, because here you have the beauty of different cultures, and that's really interesting for me, because, and I guess I went through the quintessential expat journey. When I arrived, what was my first port of call? Other South Africans. Yeah. And then it's so funny, because you find yourself sitting in this room with your community, and you leave and you go home and you're like, man, that was really, like, you come away from it like just like, you wouldn't be friends back home. You wouldn't be a community back home. And then, I don't know, I was stuck in that kind of zone for like a year, I'd say. you know, and then eventually you kind of break through your cultural barriers, and then you find your people. But it was just foreign for me because before I'd moved here, I hadn't traveled or lived abroad much, you know. So this was the first time I really encountered this big cultural shift. And I think once you can break through that, and I still see a lot of fellow South Africans when they arrive, they in that same trap. And I think once you can break through that, the UAE is, I mean, it's just overflows. I mean, it's amazing.
I think that also kind of part of this is the conversation that we've been having is also about communities within businesses or communities within organizations, but that's not all that communities are. And it also, to a certain degree, makes it seem like, you know, there is a process of joining a community. I will now fill out the community form and I have now officially become a community member. That is not real life. Like, that's not how, you know, community building works. That's not how you develop your relationships and your people. And essentially your community, another word for it is like my people. Like, these are my people. So how do you go about cultivating and nurturing and finding those people? And I think that there are sometimes formal ways and formal avenues for that to happen, and sometimes they're a lot less formal and they're more informal. And I think, you know, Bas, you know, brings up a good point. Sometimes, you know, pursuing interest-based activities is one way. Like, one of the most beautiful communities that I belong to is a rock climbing community. Genuine, like, I enjoy rock climbing. I started going to a place in Dubai. Plenty of people who enjoy the same thing. We chat, we talk. The next thing you know, you're going, you know, rock climbing together. Then you're going to dinners and lunches together. And you have your people who you have shared interests with. So I think that sometimes we might, and maybe in this kind of structure, we might overcomplicate it or over-formalize it. And sometimes it doesn't need to be that. You know, sometimes communities are about support groups and people who you might share similarities with because you're going through the same challenging things and you're trying to figure things out together. So I think that we shouldn't just also think of communities as them looking like one particular thing and having to function in a particular way. Yeah, I don't know if that really answers the question, but it's an attempt, maybe. So, yeah. All right, so I would like to wrap up this conversation by thanking Bas, Finn, Freddie, and Diego for joining us. And thank you, everyone, for sticking around. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for contributing to the conversation.
Thank you, everyone.
And this is a community, to a certain extent. So if you follow Miza's account, these happen on a monthly basis. And soon in January, the alley will also be up and running. So there will be a place for you to come, share thoughts, meet like-minded people, and perhaps, you know, find your people.
Amazing.
In this group. So thank you
Khulud,
so much.
I wanted to thank you, especially for leading this amazing conversation.
Amazing.
So please, round of applause for Khulud and the rest of the speakers.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
This has by far been one of the most fascinating conversations we've had at Talk of the Neighborhood. And as she said, it's a community. Please make sure to check out the form because we do want this to be self-led and open the opportunity for a member of the community to host this as well and curate the speakers.
Oh,
so yeah.
And on the way out, there are cards that you can write and tell us what you thought of us as speakers.
Yep.
So you can share your thoughts with us or just leave us a word. So you're welcome to do that on your way out as well.
Amazing. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks,
Have
everyone.
a good night.
Thank you.